as any company trying to push that envelope of innovation, like you talked about with 8451, it's critical to find those partners that do want to be on the edge with you, because there are some out there. And when you find those partners, you can really go fast and you can do amazing things really quickly.
Customerland is a podcast about customers, how to get more of them, how to keep them, what makes them tick. We talk to the experts, the technologies, and occasionally actual people, customers, to find out what they're all about. So if you're a CX pro, a loyalty marketer, a brand owner and agency planner, if you're a CRM and personalization geek, if you're a customer service CSAT NPS nerd, you finally have a home. I'm Mike Giambattista. Welcome to Customerland. Today I'm with Andrew Cron, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Scientist and Head of 8451 Labs. Andrew, thanks a million for being with me here.
I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to chat about innovation at Kroger in 8451.
There's quite a bit to talk about. I mean, first, I think I just want to go back and make sure that I have all the components of your title covered, because there's a lot going on there. Senior Vice President, Chief Scientist, Head of 8451 Labs. That's a lot of stuff to cover and to manage and to run.
You're telling me. So my role, let's focus just on Head of Labs. So I lead R&D for 8451. So we have a central group that we call 8451 Labs. That it's a really cool job, actually. We get to kind of look over the horizon and work on those innovation initiatives that are maybe, not next year and built into the P&L per se. Of course, we're still always focused on value and, ROI from innovation, but focused on kind of what could be out there next year. So going after those higher risk, potentially big return, initiatives, and helping figure out what's feasible, what's not, and helping de-risk a little bit. Actually, as if all those titles weren't enough, but I think it's relevant for this conversation. As of earlier this year, I also have responsibility for Kroger, for innovation at Kroger as well, for R&D at Kroger Technology, which when we're talking about kind of digitizing the store, it's exciting to kind of be in that world as well, where there's some more kind of physical innovation as well from like a sensor and video analytics perspective that I think we'll probably get to.
I'm super excited about this because it hits a handful of my personal hot buttons. Plus, whenever we touch on these kinds of topics with the customer, we get an awful lot of interaction and commentary, and people just start thinking about what the possibilities are.
Sure.
So back in January at the NRF conference, one of the big themes then were the advent, wrong word, but retail media networks, and how retailers were becoming the channels.
Sure.
With new technologies enabling CPGs to bridge a never before bridgeable gap between themselves and consumer, which is super interesting, and lots of investment in RMNs and but alongside that, I spoke with a handful of people who were running technologies that were kind of, I don't know, you have a better word for it than I do, but kind of last mile analytics. So there's a company, and I'll think of the name as soon as we hang up, I'm sure, who had some really cool ways of doing video analytics. Consumer stops by a video screen. This technology analyzed their sentiment and to an extent their intent based on how quickly they walked to or from the screen, their facial expressions, and was able to serve up messaging accordingly and guide them towards, A, B, or C directions. It's pretty cool stuff. And I thought that actually kind of blew me away, because that's been really difficult to pull off, if not impossible, up until now. But what you're looking at is stuff that's not even to market yet.
Right. Or at least not in market and grocery retail. I'll probably clarify. But
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So without kind of blowing the surprises, as it were, what kinds of things are you looking at 8451 Labs that you think may be market ready at some point, may have a value proposition in the marketplace?
Yeah. Um, oh gosh, there's so much, especially when you're kind of thinking in store. Uh, I think our imaginations often, because most of us are customers at a grocery retailer, not say working or running one. I think our imaginations often go to, well, what's the customer going to see and feel kind of directly from either on their phone or screens in the store, and that is coming, right? We do, and there are some things already deployed, like cooler screens. Those aren't personalized per se, but being able to kind of have customized advertising in the stores and all that. However, I think maybe not however, but I'd encourage everyone that's working in this space to think about the other side, which is the associate experience and how we help the associates meet the customer needs better and more efficiently in real time. And I think that's actually where the first deployments are going to be. Because if you think about delivering the best possible grocery experience, of course, having a screen help you out is great, but having an associate have the time to come personally help you out, or having ensuring that there's not long lines in the store, or that the store is in pristine condition and well stocked and all that, I would argue gives you a better experience than having a screen that will talk to you, right? Do I think screens that will talk to you are coming? Yes. However, I think having advanced analytics, and so maybe taking one step back before I say that, more and more Kroger elsewhere, each associate has some kind of device in their hands, right?
Sure.
Something like an Android phone, but some kind of proprietary device that it ends up being a huge opportunity, right? Because we can feed so much insights about what's happening in the store right now, what's happening with the customers right now, to specific associates, whether it's the manager or someone in the front or someone in the back or someone doing picking, to help them do their job more effectively, which it's not like they're not already doing a great job, but of course everyone's stretched, right? So the more effectively they can meet customers needs, I think the more we'll see that growth for customers. So you're talking about like being able to see people's intentions and all that. I think that is coming. I think there's likely lower hanging fruit. For instance, now of course the store is a large space to cover, but if we are able to see the entire state of the store from like a top down perspective and see where customers are queuing, maybe where there's a mess, where customers are waiting, and notify associates, in real time, that there's an issue that they could potentially help address. I think that will, sorry, the belief, I think that will materially, that is coming, and I think that will materially affect, customers' experience. One thing I do want to emphasize, though, just not just with this, but with everything, is that treating customers' data right and ensuring that we have consent and protect privacy and all those things is extremely important. And we start thinking about doing advanced analytics in the store, also making sure that you are protecting customers' privacy is extremely important. And there's been a lot of innovation in that space as well. So if you think about cameras, one extreme is like being able to tell what people are kind of feeling based on the look on their face. Another extreme, which is also super important, is to be able to, on the hardware, detect that you're looking at a face at all and remove it before you potentially send it up the kind of analytics chain, because
Sure.
you may not want to have everyone's faces kind of recorded through history. And I think one more is, of course, the insights that we will soon be able to give to both CPGs and Kroger itself. Even just think doing experiments and not just seeing what we see today, which is either surveys or, of course, sales data. Let's say if you put a display in a certain place or change how the assortment's laid out, but actually being able to see, heat map or hotspots or timing for when customers stop, how long they dwell, will be extremely insightful. And, thus far is not trivial to create, especially at scale.
So, admittedly, I would be the absolute wrong person to have your job. Not only because I'm seriously unqualified for it, but because being in a position where you're looking at technologies, potentially game-changing technologies, as kind of your job description
Sure.
and what people could be doing with those, 2-3 years out is literally the definition of, how I want to spend my career. But it would be, I'd have shiny object syndrome to the point where nothing productive would happen. Having said that, though, you clearly don't suffer from the same problem. But when you're looking at these things, the quantity of solutions that you see out there, one, I'm just curious to see, what's the most exciting, maybe not even from a value or productivity standpoint, but what do you think is the wildest, coolest stuff out there? Because you probably have a view to that better than most people.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to hear, layer on the value there. But first, what's just exciting and cool?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are one of them I kind of touched on already, but I think there are two areas in grocery retail that really come to mind. One isn't specifically in grocery retail, but I'd probably lose my job if I didn't mention that, the explosion of large language models is really exciting for candidly anyone who has a lot of text that they need to understand. So that, of course, could be Google or Microsoft, but any corporation or doesn't have to be a corporation even that has a huge amount of documentation or feedback or descriptions that they want to be able to understand in a more interactive way. I mean, we're still kind of discovering what these technologies will be able to do reliably and not. But I think the way we as people process huge amounts of text information is going to change significantly. I don't know if that's so much a grocery statement as much as I'd say it's more of a technology statement overall, and it'll be really exciting to see how that unfolds. The other, which I have, to be honest, in the retail space find more exciting, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit. The other is to start to have more and more kind of intelligence at the edge, right? So that's everything from, at this point, effectively everyone has a phone in their pocket. I realize not quite everyone, but the penetration of phones is very high. Associates more and more have devices, in their pockets or somewhere with them. But also as this technology gets cheaper and cheaper, we will have more and more sensors throughout the store. So you start to think about Internet of Things, right? And starting to get the cost so low that we can understand through the entire supply chain whether or not something is staying cold enough or moving fast enough or where it's getting held up, or if there's potentially a less than ideal kind of gases that are near, say, produce at some point that are inhibiting freshness. And it kind of goes on and on and on. As we're able to both collect more and more data, and it's not just customer behavior data, but it's everything throughout the retail experience. As we're able to collect more and more of that, process it in real time, and then push it in near real time to the people that need to see it, know about it, understand it, I think we're going to be able to react at a pace that we've just never seen before. And that gets me really excited, partially because I think it'll be very impactful, but also because it involves so many. It's not just one innovation, right? And it requires tens of innovations, to create that whole kind of real-time data pipeline, if you will, that as it starts, as companies, Kroger included, start to create these, I think we're going to see a real jump in how well we're able to execute.
I want to take a quick break from the conversation to tell you a story, our story, the story of the customer. As of the air date for this podcast, the customer is officially 4 years old. And if you do the math, that puts our birth date just before the pandemic hit in full. And if you operated in this space at the time, you'll know that this business, at least in our world, came to a screeching halt. And it didn't really come back to life for another year plus. To say those were difficult months is a giant understatement. They were for a lot of businesses. But we got lucky. Right around that same time, I was introduced to a person and his company that literally transformed this operation and got us on a solid footing, on a solid path. I'm happy and proud to say that the customer is now stable and strong. And a lot of that credit goes to a group called Relationshiping Consulting. Relationshiping is the brainchild of George Wiedemann, who, if you're not familiar, is the founder and CEO of one of the largest ad agency conglomerates in the world. His tenure leading the efforts at Time Inc. and Gray Direct were transformative, to say the least. And now George and his team are helping organizations across the customer engagement ecosystem to build healthier businesses and happier shareholders. I can't say enough about the effect of those efforts on the customer. Suffice to say, if your business operates in some corner of this big ecosystem, and if you're looking for a growth partner and strategist, you really should give Relationshiping a shout. Or reach out to us at the customer and we'll put you in touch. So you sort of touched on something I'm not even sure how to ask it, but because you explore and investigate such a breadth of technologies and opportunities out there, and get to decide how to shape and manipulate them in order to bring value to retail and grocery. If you're looking at it all through the lens of the retail experience, what's the roadmap there? And that's not even the right question, but how do you, as someone who runs 8451 Labs, think about operationalizing these cool new ideas, these things, because they need to fit into an operations circuit somehow at some point to bring the right value at the right time. And it seems to me that operationalizing these things is probably its own set of really unique and maybe even more difficult challenges. How do you make this kind of plug fit into this kind of plug? That's basic, but as you just said, it requires tens of technological advancements to make some of this stuff real.
Yeah. And that's a very complicated question, so probably dance around parts
Sorry,
of it. No, it's a great question. It's really the crux of what we're trying to do, right? So one is that, okay, I think there's, let's call it three things that we have to be balancing all the time. So one is to, of course, and this is kind of what we're talking about so far, is to do our best. It's very hard because things are moving so fast, but to have a pulse on what is changing, right? From a pure technology perspective, set retail aside, but where is data science going? Where is compute going? Sensors, so on and so forth, like seeing where that's going and being ready. That if you're an R&D or a lab that just does that, though, I think that you'll miss the point because you won't have the impact because you're not bringing that change management along, right? Deploying anything across thousands of stores and hundreds of thousands of associates and millions of customers is extremely challenging. And I'll make a bold statement and say, I don't think it's bold, but it might sound bold to say, you absolutely will not do that in a lab, right? You can get people imagining, dreaming, maybe even proving the concept, proving some economics, showing that a particular innovation could be feasible, but strictly within a lab without collaboration, that's about as far as you get, which means the other kind of two pillars, in my opinion, of running any successful innovation arm is to have some folks that are tightly integrated with business teams and understanding their problems. So we actually do our best whenever it's feasible, to get ourselves, in the shoes. It's easy to get in the shoes of the customers because, we all obviously go buy groceries, right? But to also get ourselves in the shoes of the associates, whether or not it's going to look at, visit warehouses and understanding their issues, or going to pick for a day, and understanding the challenges there, going through store walks and seeing, what the challenges a manager has, so on and so forth. Really seeing and feeling those challenges is super important so that as we look at what's coming on the horizon, we have a constant eye to, do these new technologies offer solutions to real problems, right? Because there's going to be all kinds of technology out there. It's exciting for somebody, but not for grocery retail, right? So having an eye for what are the big problems that no one's figured out that would have an impact on, a grocer, is huge. And then the other one, and this is, the third, which is probably the least exciting, but sometimes the most important, is doing the nitty gritty of, once you've said, well, man, this is a big problem to solve, and we do think something's feasible, is, doing the work of like getting through a business case and saying, look, is this actually viable? Can we scale at cost, or is there actually more innovation to figure out how to even test or get to a whole division scale? Do we have partners to scale? Could we do the change management? That takes much, much more than an R&D group, and that's where we have to do it through collaboration. And ultimately, you could think of it as even kind of selling to the rest of the business that, hey, we've almost kind of planted the seed and shown that this, if you use the analogy, to show that this plant can grow, but you've got to take it and you've got to put it in the greenhouse and then in the garden and grow it, and we can help. But if the business doesn't want to take it and scale it, then, which often happens, by the way, then we move on to the next thing and,
Right.
keep going until we find the next big breakthrough.
Well, it is one thing to identify one application that's going to bring some value to the chain, sequence, stack, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And kind of insert that as a singular solution. That's one thing. I'm sure you probably deal with that frequently, but it's entirely different proposition when you're looking at, LLMs and their potential significance and impact on many components of that same chain or stack. And that, it seems to me, involves, as you've said, change management, maybe even cultural change.
Absolutely.
That, goes well beyond just a kind of, the exciting shiny object syndrome that I'm so, is that part of your purview as well, or are those other components, other groups within Kroger and 8451 who are charged with kind of vetting and understanding how these bigger initiatives get deployed, or even if?
Yeah, so that's definitely a beyond just R&D, right? So now we're really talking. It depends on which thing we're digging into specifically. That that now goes to broader, engineering or product leadership at either 8451 or Kroger technology. But we, of course, on these big novel applications, we have to work together, right? Because so what am I trying to say? Sometimes it even goes the other way, where you say, hey, we think this technology can solve this problem, but we're not sure. Can R&D help us kind of vet it, prove it, see if it's feasible, see if it's real? Or sometimes it goes the other way. We have a great idea, we see a problem, we show that it's potentially feasible, and we come to them and say, this is what we think. Let's work together to come up with kind of a plan for how it would scale out. But absolutely, once you're talking about materially, even incrementally, but once you're talking about materially changing the way such a complicated operation operates, it takes an enormous team and many different teams to get through, whether it's building the technology or going through the change management. And we are just one small piece of that very complicated puzzle. And as I think you're also implying, it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of collaboration, and and often a lot of, we try not to say failures. We refer to them more as pauses. Sometimes you're too early and the business isn't ready or the technology isn't ready, right? And we move on. That doesn't mean that we've failed, we've learned, we've shown that something could be feasible in the future. And in fact, we have an initiative right now that we thought was quote dead 3 years ago, and now we're partnering to scale it across the enterprise. It just wasn't the right time, right? So having that patience to pause and kind of pull multiple threads at the same time while you're waiting for the right time for one of them is it's an art more than a science, and it's also a cultural shift that you often have to undertake to get folks to be willing to wait for one opportunity whilst working on another.
I'm thinking of here's my impression of Kroger. I'm on the outside, you're
Sure.
on the inside, so
Yeah.
we'll talk offline about how poorly I've assessed this. No, but Kroger 8451, you are proving fairly consistently that you as a combined group are pushing innovation in grocery retail. And in my view, you're probably pushing innovation harder and further than almost any other entity, certainly other entity I can think of in that space. So it seems to me that your culture is probably one of where innovation, where cultural change is going to be a little bit more feasible than most others, just because that's who you are. That's your DNA as of the past 10 years or so.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with other entities, it would seem that whereas this will come out sounding like a question at some point, but for now it's for now, I would think that most other outside organizations would view recommendations as not the right word, but kind of a cherry picker solution. Like they can't see the holistic approach that you're taking to grocery retail and improving the value points along these complex chains. So they're probably only going to see, oh, great, they come up with a great solution. Let's see how we can fit that into our organization. Sure. I still don't think there's an actual question in there, but
maybe I will just say, so the 80, definitely coming squarely into the 8451 space where we have all of our CPG partners as well. I think you're half right. And I obviously won't name names here, but of course there are some organizations that are more followers than wanting to push the envelope and wanting to see a new innovative offering or capability, thoroughly vetted and proven before, they sign up. Sure. However, there are other partners with 8451 and Kroger that are extremely innovative. And, to be honest, sometimes it's the other way where like, man, they're banging on my door all the time. Like, when's the next cool thing coming out? I want to test it. I heard you talk about this. I'm probably going to get it from this call too, right? Like people are going to hear it and be like, hey, you were talking a big game about X. When are we going to test it, right? Let's test it. As any company trying to push that envelope of innovation, like you talked about with 8451, it's critical to find those partners that do want to be on the edge with you, because there are some out there. And when you find those partners, you can really go fast and you can do amazing things really quickly. So I don't know if that answered the question that was behind there, but I think it's at least important if you're thinking about how to do innovation through partnerships.
It clarified my murky thinking. Still looking for an actual question in there, but I think it would be fun to go through the different use cases of and where some of these technologies can be deployed. But I'm almost wondering if that's not a subsequent conversation because there's so much we could talk about. It's entirely up to you. I'm happy to go there, but I feel like this might be
Yeah, I think considering how many we could talk about, it'd probably be better to pick one and kind of drill in deep on another day, and we can keep this topic more about how we approach it more holistically and the big opportunities and whatnot.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And I don't know how hard it is to get on your schedule, but if that's something that you're into, I think, whenever it works for you and your team to do a follow-up, and we can start digging into each one of these, because there's gold there.